Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. I'm enjoying a nice cup of vanilla Earl Grey this afternoon. It feels very fall-like and it smells so delicious. Now I have 12 books to talk about in this reading roundup, so we better get right into it. The first one I didn't really read and it doesn't really count, but I wanted to show you anyway because I thought it was so cool. This is the Anne of Green Gables cookbook by Kate Macdonald, and Kate Macdonald is the granddaughter, I believe, of L.M. Montgomery. This book was originally published in the 80s, but it has been reissued and kind of updated a little bit, and I wanted to show it to you because it is really just really nice. And so if I found this at the library, so if you are a huge fan of Anne of Green Gables, then this might be something you want to add to your collection. I just thought that it was really pretty, and it has just the recipes that you know and love from the series. And so I have already made the raspberry cordial. I always was so curious whenever I read Anne of Green Gables to know what raspberry cordial tastes like, and it is delicious. And so the book just has recipes, it has quotes from the books, and really nice pictures, and the raspberry cordial was so good, and it's great because it's just raspberries, sugar, lemons, and water. And it was really refreshing. So anyway, if you can get your hands on this book to check it out, you might enjoy that. And then I read Simon Beckett's The Restless Dead. This is from his David Hunter series. David Hunter is a forensic anthropologist, so think Bones, you know, Temperance Brennan, but in the UK. I really like this series. I think it's a really, really good series, really well written. And each book, each story is just so good. And this one, I believe, is the fourth in the series. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, it's the fifth in the series. So, in this book, he gets called to Essex. A badly decomposed body has been found in the mudflats and salt marshes of the backwaters, and everybody is wondering if it's connected to a unsolved missing persons case. And so he heads out to the backwaters of Essex, and it was really good. It was very atmospheric. The author did a really good job of kind of like letting you feel like you were there in this really unique environment, and it was a good story. I didn't guess who the killer was, and it was really tense and really well written. I can highly recommend this series. If you've never read the David Hunter series by Simon Beckett, then I can highly recommend them. And then I read A Fatal Obsession by Faith Martin. This one was really interesting. It caught my eye because it is set in Oxford in 1960. So that already got my attention. The main character is probationary WPC Trudy Loveday. So that also was so interesting. So she's the only female in her at her station, and her DI doesn't know what to do with her. Like, what do you do with a woman in the office? And so he sends her out on these ridiculous assignments because he just doesn't know what to do with her. And she really does just want to be a good police officer. She wants to become a detective. And so she gets sent to go help the coroner. The coroner wants to reopen a case from a few years previously. And so she gets sent to him because he can't officially question everybody. He needs an actual police officer with him. Meanwhile, a wealthy man from the area has been receiving weird letters. And the last one threatens the life of his son, and so he finally calls in the police, and so they're investigating that as well. This was really good. I really enjoyed it. I really liked the character of Trudy, women police constable. What a ridiculous title, right? But it was really good. There was a really great sense of time and place in this book. Really interesting story, really interesting characters, and I've already got the second one in this series out from the library. And then I don't know why, I can't remember why, but I read Shutter Island by Dennis Lehane. I can't remember like if someone recommended it to me or what drew my attention, because this is certainly not a new book at all. This was first published in 2003. And I've never seen the movie, but I knew that it was kind of creepy and scary. And holy cow, was this book creepy and scary. Okay, I was totally scared. So this book is set in 1954. U.S. Marshal Teddy Daniels and his new partner are sent out to Shutter Island, where there is a hospital for the criminally insane because one of their patients has gone missing. Yeah, it was totally creepy. And scary, and yeah. So I read it. Yay for me, right? And then I read James Patterson's The 20th Victim. This is the latest in the Women's Murder Club series. I'm starting to get less and less interested in this series, but it was in the library, and so I grabbed it. The Women's Murder Club, I find the concept interesting. So there's a police officer, the medical examiner, a lawyer, and a journalist, and these four women are friends, and then, you know, stuff happens. And so the main character is the police officer. I see, and I already forgot her name. Isn't that terrible? Lindsay. And these are told in first person from Lindsay's perspective, and so in this particular one, 3 victims, 3 bullets, 3 cities, and it was okay. Yeah, the biggest problem that I had with this was that something from the synopsis didn't match the book, and that drives me crazy. I don't know why they do that. So, for example, yeah, while Assistant DA Yuki Castellano clashes with Lindsay in a brutal test of loyalty, medical examiner Claire Washburn faces a potentially fatal crisis of her own. So the whole book, I was waiting for this, you know, brutal test of loyalty between Lindsay and Yuki, and it never happened. There was far more of a problem between Lindsay and her journalist friend Cindy, just because of what can a police officer tell a journalist, and that none of that was a surprise. So I never got this brutal test of loyalty, and that kind of that really irritates me when the synopsis doesn't match the book, or when they try and make more of something in a synopsis than is actually there. And then I read the latest in the Maeve Kerrigan series, Cruel Acts by Jane Casey. This is a series. Maeve is a detective sergeant in London, and I love this series. It is really good. The relationship between Maeve and her DI, Josh Derwent, is compelling. Their friendship is so interesting, and the books, like, they're just really well written. The mysteries, the cases that she works on are really, really interesting. And so in this case, a year ago, Leo Stone was convicted of the murder of 2 women and sentenced to life in prison. But one of the jurors writes, self-publishes his experiences on that trial, and kind of like blatantly says that he and the other jurors looked at newspaper reports about Leo Stone and allowed his past behavior and and police record to affect their verdict. And so therefore he was, his appeal was accepted and he was going to be retried. And so Maeve Kerrigan and Josh Derwent have to like reinvestigate to make sure that everything is like, there's no surprises when the new trial starts. And it was just really, really good. And I can't wait for the newest book to come out. Like, it's just now being released. And all the books are from first person, from Maeve's perspective. But this next book coming out is actually from the perspective of Georgie Shaw, who is, I think she's a detective constable on the team. And so we get a look at Maeve and Josh's relationship through her eyes, which I am very fascinated by, and I can't wait to read that one. And then this was a reread for me, A Rising Man by Abir Mukherjee. And the reason why I reread it was because I've now got the second and third book in the series and I wanted to remind myself. So this is a historical mystery set in India in 1919 or 1920. And these are really interesting, 1919. So the main character is Captain Sam Wyndham. He is new to India, fresh off the boat, as they say. And the first case he gets is a man found in a rough part of town, has been killed. He is a senior official in the government. And there's been a note shoved in his mouth that's about like free India or else. And so they believe that there are terrorists involved. And so kind of Sam is kind of like thrown in the deep end, as it were. He works with an Inspector Digby and a British educated but Indian born Sergeant Banerjee, who is called Surrender Not, which is a great name. Although he's only called that because Digby couldn't be bothered to figure out how to pronounce his real name, which is sad. And so unsurprisingly, there is a lot about race in here, and there's a lot about duty, and it's really very fascinating. The mystery is also really interesting, and I'm excited to continue on with this series. And then I read Martin Edwards' Gallows Court. This is just out last year, and his second one in this series is also just been released. This is a golden age mystery. It's set in London in 1930. Now, Martin Edwards is the guy who writes the introductions to most, if not all, of the British Library crime classics that are being released. And so he is very familiar with the golden age of detective writing. And so I was really excited to get into this. The main character in this is Rachel Savernake. So I'm just going to read the back. Sooty, sulphurous, and malign. No woman should be out on a night like this. A spate of violent deaths, the details too foul to print, has horrified the capital, and the smog-bound streets are deserted. But Rachel Savernake is no ordinary woman. To Scotland Yard's embarrassment, she solved the chorus girl murder, and now she's on the trail of another killer. Jacob Flint, manning the Clarion's crime desk, is looking for the scoop that will make his name. He's certain there is more to Miss Savernake's amateur sleuthing than meets the eye. Flint's pursuit of his story will mire him ever deeper in a labyrinth of deception and corruption. Murder by murder, he is swept ever closer to that ancient place of execution where it all began and where it will finally end, Gallows Court. So this first book is definitely an introduction to Rachel Savernake. You do have to read this series in order because you need to understand Rachel. And so, although for the majority of these books, she is like, it is really hard to understand her. You don't get a whole lot of what makes her tick until the end. So I did enjoy this. However, it didn't feel golden age. Like, I was looking at who else was writing at that in the 30s, and so Agatha Christie, you know, Dorothy L. Sayers, and it just didn't really feel like that. It was much darker. And so if you're okay with that, then this could be the book for you. It was very well written and very interesting, but just keep that in mind, that it may not feel golden age, and that it is much darker than any Agatha Christie or Dorothy L. Sayers. And then because I had read the last book in the series, I decided to start back at the beginning and read the series all over again. And so this is Karin Slaughter's Blindsighted. This is the first in her Trent County series, where we are introduced to Sarah Linton and her ex-husband Jeffrey Tolliver. You know what? Karin Slaughter is an amazing writer. She can pull you in. She is not afraid to write about really difficult things, but her characters are so compelling. I mean, she's able to write people that feel so real. Their motivations aren't always pure, and they have pasts and histories that affect their actions in the book, and just, I can highly recommend Karin Slaughter. Just be aware they are difficult to read. She doesn't shy away from hard things. She doesn't shy away from violence. But they're just so compelling because the characters are so interesting. So in this one, a young college professor is found brutally mutilated in the local diner by Sarah, actually. And so she's the pediatrician, but she's also the coroner, and her ex-husband Jeffrey is the chief of police in the town, and so they investigate. And the victim is the sister of one of the detectives on his squad. So it's just so good. I can highly recommend Karin Slaughter. And then I read the latest in the Royal Spyness series. This is The Last Mrs. Summers by Rhys Bowen. This is a historical mystery series set in the 30s that is very entertaining. I always just really enjoy this series. It's lighthearted and funny with good mysteries. And so someone on the back said that it reads like a collaboration between Agatha Christie and P.G. Wodehouse. I would totally agree. So this latest one in the series is set in 1935, and Lady Georgiana Roanoke goes with her friend Belinda to Cornwall. Belinda has inherited a property from her grandmother, and they go to check it out in Cornwall. And then various things ensue. And there are definite shades of Rebecca in this book from Daphne du Maurier. So it's very gothic, and it was just superbly entertaining. And then I finally finished Jane Austen's England by Roy and Lesley Adkins. This is a history book about daily life in the Georgian and Regency periods that I started in July for Jane Austen in July, and I finally finished it. This book was great. It delved into all aspects of life in the Georgian and Regency periods. So it was really interesting. And the thing that I loved the most about this book was how many primary source materials the authors used to write this. So letters, diaries, newspaper articles. So you really felt like that the people were real, that the events were real. And they were real, but when you're so far removed, it can feel like it's fiction. And so the amount of primary source material really helped in my understanding and in reminding me that these were real people. I also really loved that the authors chose about 4 people, and they they used their diaries and letters throughout the book for all the different chapters. And so you kind of come to know those four people. One of them is Jane Austen. But you come to know them, and it just really helps, I think, rather than using just all kinds of different people, which they do, but to keep coming back to these four people, I thought was brilliant. And so I had a few notes here. There was great maps and tables at the beginning. So if you go in for that, then you'll really enjoy that. And then in their introduction, they say, "This place of radical change is the real England of Jane Austen and the subject of this book. We wanted to show how the mass of ordinary people, our ancestors, lived and fitted into her England." And I think they did it. They did a good job. And so here are three of the people. So they of course used letters from Jane Austen, but they also used personal letters and diaries for William Holland. Personal letters and diaries were rarely intended to be published, but were written for the information and enjoyment of one or two people, or at most a family and their descendants, as William Holland revealed in January 1801. Quote, "I began reading my diary to my family from its commencement and shall continue to do so as far as the last year goes." End quote. His extensive diaries allow us to become acquainted not just with him and his family in the Somerset parish of Overstowe and beyond, but also with his overworked servants and the local people, including various paupers, labourers, and tradesmen. Only an abridged selection of these diaries has ever been published, and so the full original manuscript diaries provide a fresh window on English life, rather like the diaries of the Reverend James Woodford. 6 years younger than Holland, he was an unmarried clergyman from Ansford in Somerset who spent much of his working life on the other side of England in his Norfolk parish of Weston Longville. So we hear from both of those men throughout the book, and then also in northern England, from Wigan to Liverpool through the Lake District in Yorkshire, Nellie Wheaton provides another perspective on life at that time. She was clearly very intelligent, but her potential was stifled by poverty and by her low-class status as a governess. And then at the end of their introduction, they write this. Born in Portsmouth in 1812, before most of Jane Austen's books had even been published, Dickens was sent to work in a factory in London at the age of 12 and came to rely on writing to earn money. Looking back to the time of the French Revolution, his novel, A Tale of Two Cities, starts with the celebrated words, "It was the best of times, it was the worst of times. It was the age of wisdom, it was the age of foolishness. It was the epoch of belief, it was the epoch of incredulity. It was the season of light, it was the season of darkness. It was the spring of hope, it was the winter of despair." This is a succinct summary of Jane Austen's England, on which we are about to eavesdrop. And then finally, there's a description of someone who goes down a coal mine. In 1811. And this is what he wrote. "The mode is rather alarming. The extremity of the rope which works up and down the shaft being formed into a loop, you pass one leg through it so as to sit or to be almost astride on the rope. Then, hugging it with both arms, you are turned off from the platform over a dark abyss where you would hardly venture if the depth be seen. This was 63 fathoms. One of the workmen bestrode the loop by the side of me, and down we went with considerable rapidity. The wall of rock seemed to rush upward, and the darkness increased. The mouth above appeared a mere speck of light. I shut my eyes for fear of growing giddy. The motion soon diminished, and we touched the ground. Each of us had a flannel dress and a candle, and thus proceeded through a long passage, rock above, rock below, and a shining black wall of coal on each side. That sounds terrifying! So I can highly recommend Jane Austen's England by Roy and Lesley Adkins. It was a fascinating look at history in England in the Georgian and Regency time period. And then finally, I read Lockdown by Peter May. Now, this book was creepy, just because it was so timely. So this is a book about London during a pandemic. Peter May actually wrote this book, the manuscript, in 2005, but it was never published. And so they published it this year during a pandemic. So in this book, the pandemic is a bird flu pandemic, H5N1, I think. And so this may not be the book for you if you don't want to read about a pandemic during a pandemic. I totally understand. But I was entertained. One thing that I loved was that this book was, it took place over 24 hours. So the pace was relentless. So London is the epicenter of a global pandemic. The city is in lockdown. There is violence and civil disorder. Martial law has been imposed. A deadly virus has already claimed thousands of victims. Health and emergency services are overwhelmed. At a building site for a temporary hospital, construction workers find a bag containing the bones of a murdered child. A remorseless killer has been unleashed on the city. His mission is to take all measures necessary to prevent the bones from being identified. D.I. Jack McNeil, counting down the hours on his final day at the Met, is sent to investigate. His career is in ruins, his marriage over, and his own family touched by the virus. Sinister forces are tracking his every move, prepared to kill again to conceal the truth. Which will stop him first, the virus or the killers? So this was just entertaining. It was weird, honestly, to be reading this right now because so much of it seems normal for the world that we are currently living in. I mean, everybody kept their distance from each other. The streets were quiet. Everybody wore masks. That part was very recognizable, and I think therefore made the story that much more terrifying. So, Lockdown might be the book for you, or you might want to wait a few years before you read it. So those are the books that I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to chat about them in the comment section down below. Do any of them look interesting to you? I would love to hear about that as well. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.